They say no man is an island, and yet there exists a man surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. A man with no friends, not by chance, perhaps not even by choice, but by circumstance, misunderstanding, or pain. To be a man with no friends is to live in a world of silence when laughter should echo. It's to face battles alone, to celebrate victories with no one to cheer you on, and to weather storms without a single umbrella shared. Social isolation is one of the most underestimated issues of our time. It doesn't always look like the stereotypical image of a person sitting alone in a room. In fact, some of the loneliest people in the world are those who appear to be surrounded by others. You can be in a crowded room at a busy job, even part of a large family, and still feel utterly disconnected. At its core, social isolation is not about physical distance, but emotional distance. It's the absence of meaningful interaction, the lack of someone who truly sees you, listens without judgment, and values your presence. This type of loneliness cuts deep because it doesn't stem from solitude by choice, but from a sense of being unseen, unheard, and unimportant. In today's world, digital connections are more abundant than ever, yet genuine friendships seem harder to come by. We exchange messages, likes, and emojis, but how often do we exchange vulnerability? How often do we take time to ask, "Are you really okay?" and wait long enough to hear the truth? Social isolation has very real consequences. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness can lead to increased stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems like high blood pressure and weakened immune function. It can impact a person's sense of purpose, self-worth, and motivation. Over time, isolation begins to shape how a person sees themselves, not just as someone alone, but as someone unworthy of connection. And perhaps most painfully, isolation can become a cycle. The more alone someone feels, the harder it becomes to reach out. Shame creeps in, fear of rejection builds, the walls go up, and the silence grows louder. It's not always about not wanting friends. Sometimes it's about not knowing how to begin. Yet, despite its prevalence, social isolation is often overlooked. It's quiet. It doesn't always demand attention. It hides behind small talk, polite smiles, and busy schedules. And because of that, many people suffer in silence, believing they are alone in their loneliness, when in truth, they are not. Loneliness is often treated like a flaw, something to be embarrassed about, as if admitting to feeling isolated is the same as confessing failure. There's a deep, often unspoken stigma around being friendless, especially for adults. Society tends to associate friendship with likability, charisma, and social success. So, when someone has no friends, assumptions are made. People might wonder, what's wrong with them? Why don't they have anyone? This stigma can be especially harsh for men, who are often taught from a young age to suppress emotions, be self-reliant, and avoid vulnerability. The phrase "man up" echoes like a warning. Don't show weakness, don't admit pain, and yet needing human connection is not weakness, it's deeply human. Still, many internalize the idea that seeking companionship or talking about loneliness is shameful, a sign of emotional immaturity or social failure. As a result, those experiencing loneliness may hide it. They mask it behind forced smiles, busyness, humor, or detachment. They might tell themselves, "I'm just independent," or "I prefer being alone," even if, deep down, they crave companionship. The fear of being judged or misunderstood keeps them from reaching out, from being honest about their needs. Even when someone musters the courage to admit they feel alone, they're often met with responses that minimize their experience. "Just join a club. Make some friends. You'll be fine." These well-meaning phrases carry a dismissiveness that implies loneliness is simply a matter of effort, overlooking the emotional complexity behind it. Making friends isn't like flipping a switch. It requires safety, trust, mutual interest, and time. It also requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is hard when you've already been hurt, ignored, or excluded. Moreover, the media rarely helps. In movies and shows, the friendless character is often portrayed as strange, awkward, or broken. The outsider, the loner, the one who doesn't quite belong. Rarely do we see honest depictions of ordinary people who, despite being intelligent, kind, or talented, are simply struggling to connect. These portrayals reinforce the idea that to be alone is to be flawed, and that belief deepens the shame. This stigma doesn't just isolate people socially, it isolates them emotionally. It convinces them that no one would understand, that everyone else has figured out friendship except them. And when someone believes their loneliness makes them unworthy of others, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Loneliness and the absence of close friendships rarely come from a single cause. Instead, they often stem from a complex combination of experiences, personality traits, past traumas, and even cultural or societal pressures. No two people walk the same path into isolation, and to truly understand a man with no friends, we must first understand the many reasons someone might find themselves alone. For some, the cause is rooted in childhood, growing up in a home where emotional connection was lacking, where vulnerability was punished or ignored. A child who learns early that opening up leads to pain may grow into an adult who instinctively keeps people at arm's length. These early patterns, once protective, can become barriers in adult life, making it difficult to form and maintain friendships. Others may struggle due to mental health challenges. Conditions like social anxiety, depression, or PTSD can make it incredibly hard to engage with others. The energy it takes to show up, make small talk, or trust someone new can feel overwhelming. And when a person is in survival mode, mentally or emotionally, nurturing relationships often takes a backseat to simply getting through the day. Introversion and personality type also play a role. While introversion doesn't mean someone dislikes people, it does mean they may find social interaction draining rather than energizing. For deeply introverted individuals, building friendships requires more deliberate effort and recovery time, which can make spontaneous social bonding, the kind that often sparks friendship, more difficult to achieve or sustain. In some cases, the root lies in past betrayals or toxic friendships. Someone who has been hurt, manipulated, or abandoned by those they once trusted may hesitate to let anyone in again. The memory of that pain lingers, acting as a warning sign anytime new relationships begin to form. The fear of being hurt again can be stronger than the desire to connect. Life circumstances can also be a powerful force. Relocating to a new city, losing a job, going through a divorce, or experiencing a major life change can disrupt social circles and lead to isolation. And as people get older, it often becomes harder to make new friends. Routines become entrenched. Social circles shrink, and opportunities to meet others naturally begin to fade. Sometimes the reason is simply bad timing. Two people may connect, but one is too busy, too distracted, or too overwhelmed to build something meaningful. Over time, the pattern of temporary connections without depth can leave someone feeling like friendship just isn't in the cards for them. Then there are those who don't quite fit into the typical social mold. Maybe their interests are niche, their sense of humor unique, or their communication style different. These individuals can feel out of sync with those around them, constantly adjusting who they are in order to be accepted, only to end up feeling even more disconnected. It's important to remember that the absence of friends is not always a reflection of someone's character or value. It's not always about being unlikable or antisocial. Often it's about circumstance, timing, fear, or pain. While loneliness can be painful, solitude, when embraced, not endured, can also be powerful. There is a quiet strength that emerges from spending time alone, from learning to sit with your own thoughts, face your emotions without distraction, and build a sense of self that is not dependent on external validation. A man with no friends is not always broken. Sometimes he is in the process of discovering who he is beyond who others expect him to be. Solitude offers a kind of clarity that social noise can blur. It allows space for reflection, creativity, and growth. Many great thinkers, artists, and innovators have found their deepest insights not in crowds, but in the silence of solitude. When you are alone, you are forced to listen to your mind, your body, your needs. You begin to notice the thoughts you've avoided, the desires you've ignored, and the patterns you've repeated. It can be uncomfortable, yes, but it can also be transformative. Living without close friendships often means developing a kind of emotional independence, the ability to self-soothe, to motivate oneself, to be one's own company. It's not an easy skill to acquire, but for those who have had to rely on themselves, it becomes second nature. These individuals often learn to find comfort in their routines, purpose in their work, or peace in their hobbies. They become self-reliant not out of arrogance or pride, but out of necessity. In solitude, some people also discover authenticity. Without the pressure to perform socially or meet the expectations of a group, they may feel more free to be themselves, quirks and all. They may read what they truly enjoy, listen to music that resonates deeply, or explore passions without fear of judgment. For them, solitude becomes a sanctuary rather than a sentence. Moreover, solitude can act as a shield from toxic relationships. Some people choose to be alone rather than surround themselves with shallow or harmful connections. They value depth over popularity, quality over quantity. In a world that often encourages endless networking and constant socialization, choosing solitude can be a radical act of self-respect. But it's important to distinguish between solitude and isolation. Solitude is chosen, it's empowering, restorative. Isolation, on the other hand, is often unchosen, a feeling of being cut off, locked out, or left behind. The line between the two is subtle, and one can easily slip into the other without realizing it. For some men with no friends, their solitude may be a refuge, a conscious decision to focus inward, to protect their peace, or to heal from wounds still raw. They may find strength in their ability to navigate life independently, to create joy and meaning on their own terms. They become their own anchor, their own mirror, their own guide. In a world that moves quickly and often celebrates individual achievement over collective care, empathy is sometimes overlooked, yet it is one of the most powerful forces in the human experience. Empathy allows us to step outside of ourselves and into the emotional landscape of another person. It asks us not to fix, judge, or compare, but simply to understand. And when it comes to a man with no friends, empathy can be the difference between deepening his isolation and beginning to bridge it. Too often, people who are alone are misunderstood. They may be labeled antisocial, awkward, or difficult. Assumptions are made without effort to listen or learn. Assumptions that ignore the complexities of someone's inner world. Empathy challenges those assumptions. It invites us to ask, what might this person have gone through, instead of what's wrong with them? That single shift in perspective has the potential to change everything. Empathy begins with curiosity, the willingness to look beyond the surface and seek the story beneath. A man with no friends may not talk about his loneliness, may not show it outwardly, but it doesn't mean he isn't carrying a heavy emotional weight. He may be guarded, not because he doesn't care, but because he has cared before and been hurt. He may seem distant, not because he lacks interest in others, but because he's unsure how to be received. When we lead with empathy, we begin to recognize that everyone has reasons for the way they are. We stop viewing someone's isolation as a personal failure and start seeing it as part of their journey a result of their circumstances, their history, or their pain. And from that place of understanding, we are more equipped to respond with kindness instead of avoidance, with patience instead of impatience. Empathy also means showing up without conditions. It doesn't mean we need to force someone to change or try to pull them out of their solitude. It means letting them know through our presence and sincerity that they are not alone, that someone sees them, values them, and accepts them as they are. For someone who has felt invisible or unwanted, this kind of compassion can feel revolutionary. In many cases, people don't need grand gestures. They need small moments of genuine care, a conversation that isn't rushed, a check-in that isn't performative, a shared silence that feels safe instead of awkward. These small moments build trust, and trust opens the door to connection. Empathy also invites us to reflect on our own role. Have we ever unknowingly contributed to someone's loneliness? Have we overlooked the quiet person in the room, chosen comfort over reaching out, or ignored the signs that someone needed a friend? Empathy encourages accountability, not in a way that guilts us, but in a way that reminds us of our shared humanity. It teaches us that we all, at one point or another, have longed to be understood, and that behind every distant gaze, every hesitant smile, every man who walks through life without close friends, there is a story waiting, not to be solved, but to be honored. Friendship, at its heart, is a relationship built on mutual effort, trust, vulnerability, and presence. It cannot be one-sided. It requires both people to give and receive, to listen as much as they speak, to care as much as they wish to be cared for. Yet for a man with no friends, that mutuality may feel elusive, and often the deeper reality is that friendship is not absent due to a lack of desire, but because the delicate balance of give and take has never quite been found, or worse, has been repeatedly broken. Many people think of friendship as something that happens naturally, that if you're likable enough, outgoing enough, or funny enough, friendships will just click. But real, lasting connection is more than chemistry or shared interest. It takes time, consistency, and a willingness to be seen. And that last part, the willingness to be truly seen, is what stops many people in their tracks. Because being seen means showing the parts of yourself that aren't polished or perfect. It means taking emotional risks, allowing others into the messy, unfiltered parts of your life. This is especially difficult for someone who has gone a long time without friends. They may have learned to keep their thoughts and emotions inside, relying solely on themselves. They may be out of practice when it comes to expressing affection, opening up about fears, or even making small talk. Social skills are like muscles. If they haven't been used in a while, they may feel weak or clumsy. And when early efforts to connect don't go well, it can reinforce the belief that maybe friendship just isn't meant for them. But friendship is not just about finding the right people. It's also about becoming the kind of person who can participate in friendship. This includes being available emotionally and mentally. It means taking initiative, not always waiting for others to reach out, but being willing to take the first step. It means showing up when it's inconvenient, listening when you don't have all the answers, and offering your presence even when you're unsure what to say. That said, this doesn't mean the burden should fall entirely on the isolated person to change. Too often, the person without friends is expected to prove their worth, to bend and perform just to earn basic human connection. But true friendship is not a prize you win by being good enough. It's a connection you build by being honest enough, patient enough, and present enough. It's not about perfection. It's about participation. Still, for someone who has experienced rejection, abandonment, or indifference, taking that first step can feel terrifying. Vulnerability is always a risk. You might not be understood. You might not be accepted. You might be met with silence. But to enter into any friendship, someone has to go first. Someone has to say, hey, I'm here. I see you. Do you want to talk? Sometimes the most meaningful friendships begin not with grand gestures, but with those simple, brave moments. It's also important to remember that friendship looks different for everyone. Some people thrive in large social circles, while others are fulfilled by one or two deep, steady connections. The measure of friendship is not how many people are around you, but how safe, known, and supported you feel in their presence. For the man with no friends, the path forward may not be about fitting into a group, but about finding or creating spaces where mutual trust can grow. And like any relationship, friendships require maintenance, not constant attention, but consistent care. They require forgiveness, communication, and flexibility. They ask us to be human with each other, imperfect, evolving, and real. No matter how long someone has walked through life without close connections, no matter how many years have passed in silence, or how deeply the wounds of rejection may run, hope is always possible. The human spirit is resilient. Even in the darkest corners of loneliness, there remains a quiet ember of longing, not weakness, but evidence of something sacred, the desire to belong. That ember, when gently fed with kindness, patience, and belief, can grow again into warmth. For a man with no friends, it might feel like time has run out, like the ship of connection has long since sailed, and now he's left watching from the shore. But friendship doesn't operate on a fixed timeline. There's no expiration date on human connection. Whether someone is 17 or 70, the possibility of meaningful relationships still exists. People can enter your life in the most unexpected ways. At a bus stop, in a bookstore, at work, online, or through a random conversation that blossoms into something more. Hope doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers through the quiet pull to try again, to say hello, to join a group, to answer a message. Sometimes it shows up as a single moment of courage, a choice to speak when silence has become the norm, to reach out even when the heart fears it won't be received. And every time that choice is made, no matter how small it seems, it chips away at the walls that loneliness built. Hope also grows in self-compassion. So often those who feel isolated turn their pain inward, blaming themselves for being alone, thinking they're broken, unworthy, or too much of a burden. But healing starts when that inner voice begins to shift, when it says, maybe it's not me. Maybe I'm not the problem. Maybe I just haven't found my people yet. That belief doesn't erase the loneliness, but it changes the way we carry it. And as painful as loneliness can be, it can also be a teacher. It reveals what we truly long for. It invites us to pay attention not just to the absence of others, but to our own unmet needs, to the ways we want to give and receive love. From that understanding comes intention. We stop settling for surface-level interactions. We begin to seek, and more importantly, to recognize relationships that nourish us. Hope can also be found in the stories of others. There are countless people who have spent long stretches of life alone, thinking they would never find connection, and yet, through a shift in mindset, a moment of openness, or the simple act of trying again, they did. They made friends in places they never expected. They created community from scratch. They redefined what friendship looked like for them. What's important to understand is that hope isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's not about ignoring the pain of being friendless. It's about believing that things can change and that you are still worthy of connection, even if the world hasn't reflected that back to you yet. Hope doesn't promise ease or instant results. It doesn't come with guarantees, but it is a light, sometimes flickering, sometimes steady, that reminds us we are still alive, still capable of reaching out, still deserving of being seen and known.